Hey everyone, Heron here from Heron Fox Farm, and I'm out here in the orchard again. It is August, I don't know the date. I think it's about August 27th or 28th, and I wanted to give you an update on the orchard and the beans. So yeah, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. 93 degrees out here. It is a beautiful sunny day. It doesn't feel that hot actually. It's pretty dry. So it's 93, but not very humid. So it's tolerable, although I might go jump in the swimming pool pretty soon. So we just started harvesting. We have 2 of the 3 varieties on the ground now. So what we do is come through with the tree shakers and we shake the trees, and all the nuts fall on the ground, and then we let them dry on the ground for about a week, and then come back with a sweeper machine that sweeps them all up into windrows. And then a 3rd machine called the pickup machine comes and scoops them up with brushes and a conveyor belt, and dumps them into a trailer that it tows behind, and then that goes to a elevator. The trailer dumps them out onto this elevator, and then that lifts them up into a semi-truck trailer bed, and then they go right down the street to my brother-in-law's huller and sheller and get processed. Just the hulls and shells taken off, and that's it. And then I pick them up there. So a few more weeks and I'll have them ready to ship out. So let me turn my phone around and I'll show you what we're doing. So here you can see the nuts on the ground, and it is a very light crop this year, unfortunately, which I was expecting, but I mean, seeing them now, I can tell it's going to be really light yield. But you know, things could always be worse. I've noticed that the orchards around the area they vary a lot. Some trees are loaded and other ones have next to nothing on them. So it was all about just which varieties bloomed when, and the little microclimates around here. So yeah, it was storming like crazy during the almond bloom, and I have a video about that. Yeah, so these are drying on the ground right now, and these are the nonpareils and sonoras, and then the buttes, I can show you what those look like. They are still on the trees. So this row here are the buttes, and they still have a ways to go. They're always the latest to mature. And it's such a light crop of those this year that at this point we're thinking of not even harvesting them. They're just, we'll shake them. Just because you can't leave them on the trees, because that harbors pests and promotes disease and stuff. So we have to get them down off the trees, but then at that point we'll see if it's even worth harvesting them. Or what I might do is just keep some of them in the shell to sell in shell, because the cost of sweeping them up, and the elevator and the trucking and the hulling and shelling is just going to be, it'll cost me probably too much than what the crop is actually worth for the buttes. So my plan at this point is probably to just keep some of them in the shell to sell as in-shell nuts, and that'll cut down a lot on my expenses and make it worth it for me to sell them that way. Hopefully, we'll see. But yeah, it's not a good year for me. you know, hopefully next year will be better. So yeah, you can see how few buttes there are in the tree. I mean, maybe to you that looks like a lot of nuts, but I mean, once they're shelled, it's like, you know, that's not much at all. So you should be able to see this tree here. These are the buttes, and there's just hardly anything on them. It's not even worth shaking them, except we have to do that because if you leave even a few nuts on the tree over winter, then the navel orange worms just go crazy. So it's not, I definitely can't leave them on the tree. So they're gonna get shaken and they'll be on the ground, and then we'll see at that point if it's worth sweeping them up and shelling them. But at this point I'm thinking not. I'll just sell them as in-shell nuts. It's an absolute beautiful day here. Not a cloud or a chemtrail in the sky. The sky is really blue today, which is nice for a change. So yeah. And you can see how we've mowed the orchard down really short to make it so we can harvest with the sweepers. But you can see how we keep the ground cover. It's still green and still growing. So we just mow it down as short as we can for harvest. And then after that, it'll grow back and be lush and green and lots of habitat for everything. So yeah, and if you see other orchards this time of year at harvest, they're just bare as can be. There's not a thing growing. And a lot of the conventional orchards, it's like that year round. They just don't have anything growing but the almond trees. And, you know, maybe they get bigger yields that way, but I couldn't let myself do that. Tasty. And some of you might think that harvesting almonds this way is bad, like shaking them and letting them fall on the ground and then sweeping them up. But basically they have to be harvested this way in order to dry. They won't dry properly on the trees, and then they won't come off at harvest time. Like they'll stick on the trees when the tree shakers shake them. So there's a small window of opportunity when the nuts are ripe, and they'll come off easily when they get shaken. And then, but you know, a lot of people think that being on the ground is dirty, but I mean, you can see they're still in the shell. They have a shell around them, and they have a hole around that. So it's like, they're pretty protected from anything. But in my opinion, an organic orchard like this with living soil that I feed with compost, and there's natural beneficial microbes, and you know, it's a living soil food web, and that repels bad things like bacteria and harmful microorganisms. So I have no issues with picking a nut right off the ground and eating it. and I've been doing this. I mean, all almonds are harvested this way, and often with soils that are really disgusting and probably do have harmful things. But like I said, the almonds are protected with the shell and the hull. But I've been selling them unpasteurized for 15 years or longer, and And I've never, not once have I had anyone say that they've gotten sick from them or had any complaints. So they're completely safe and healthy. And the soil is the same. It's safe and healthy. So yeah, that's my expert opinion on the matter. Okay, so this is the new orchard here, the 13 acres of new trees and the beans interplanted. You can see how much the beans have grown since the last orchard tour, which is about 3 weeks ago. They are up to my waist high, and so yeah, there's the beans. They are looking really good, super healthy, and tons of them. And then the young almond trees here are looking healthy and good. They're not too much bigger since the last time, but they are still kicking, so that's good. This one here is almost as tall as I am. So yeah, they're doing good. Yeah, this one row here looks really good. All the trees look like they've grown a lot, and they're really tall already. And I'm walking around here, and it looks like 100% of the trees took. We don't have a single dead tree out here, which is pretty rare actually for a brand new orchard, especially when the trees were planted in June. And you know, with the summer heat, it's typical that you lose a few to either gophers or just the trees didn't take for some reason. But in this new orchard, every single tree is alive and healthy, so I'm really excited about this one here is taller than I am. And yeah, this whole row looks really good, and actually the next row over there looks really good too. So this part of the orchard has really good soil. So yeah, it's looking great. So yeah, this section here with the new trees and the beans is 13 acres. And then I have another 13 acres of old trees that are 25 years old. And so altogether, it's 27 acres. And my father-in-law was telling me that now to be considered a small almond farm is less than 600 acres. So if you have less than 600 acres, you're considered a small farm. And I have 27 acres. So you can see the difference between what I'm doing and what everybody else is doing. So yeah, on the new orchard here that we planted 2 varieties. So 75% of the orchard is nonpareils, and so basically every other row is all nonpareils. So like this entire row here is nonpareils, and then the next row is staggered. I think it's 2 nonpareils and then a Fritz, and then 2 nonpareils and a Fritz. So we interplant the Fritz variety at 25% of the orchard, and they're staggered so that in between every nonpareil tree is a Fritz tree. Like every nonpareil tree has a Fritz tree next to it, or in between it. And then we do that for cross-pollination because the nonpareils by themselves won't produce a crop. They need another variety that blooms at the same time for the bees to carry the pollen and cross-pollinate them. And so it happens to be that the Fritz and nonpareils are 100% compatible, meaning that they bloom exactly at the same time and their pollen is compatible with the nonpareils. There's some varieties that are incompatible where either they don't bloom at the same time as the variety you want to pollinate, or the pollen itself is just not compatible with the other variety. And then actually there's another variety now called Independence, and it's self-pollinated. You don't actually need bees to pollinate it. And a lot of people are planting the Independence now because of that reason. Because renting the bees for pollination or hiring a beekeeper to pollinate, to bring their bees out, is one of the biggest expenses of the almond farms. It's my biggest expense other than compost. Like compost and bees are my two biggest expenses, and they're right about the same cost for each of them. Where you could plant Independence instead and then not need bees and save a bunch of money. But the Independence look pretty and all, but I just did a taste test between some Independence nearby and the nonpareils, and the nonpareils are just hands down the sweetest, and there's no comparison between the taste test. The Independents just don't have very much flavor or sweetness. They're not bad tasting, they don't compare. Nonpareil is it's a French word that means no parallel, like unparalleled, the best, and they are. And then the Fritz that I'm using for pollinators, they're a smaller nut, and they actually have a good flavor. They have a real strong almondy flavor. They just don't look as pretty, and they're not as sweet as the nonpareils. By far, the nonpareils are the sweetest almonds. And then on our older orchard over here, we have half nonpareils, so that like every other row is nonpareils, and then in between that is sonoras. There'll be a whole row of sonoras, and then a row of nonpareils, and then a row of buttes, and then a row of nonpareils, and then a row of sonoras, like that. And so we have two varieties that cross-pollinate the nonpareils. The sonoras bloom earlier, like they bloom just before the nonpareils, and then overlap the nonpareils when they start blooming, and then the buttes bloom afterwards, and they overlap the bloom of the nonpareils on the late end of the bloom. But the problem with that is it's typically the sonoras get hit by frost or a storm, and then they don't have a good crop because they bloom too early. And then the buttes usually have a good crop because they bloom later, but this year they really don't. There's not many buttes at all, unfortunately. Here's what the buttes look like. They're a smaller nut, and they have a really hard shell, so you need a nut cracker to crack these. But they're really pretty in the shell. So my plan this year is to sell them just like this. So yeah, look for those on my website soon. Here's what the butte looks like out of the shell. It's a smaller, rounder nut, and they're actually really tasty. This is my tractor. It's a 2004 5520. I think it's around 80 horsepower. It's a beast, and yeah, I love it. It's a great old machine. And then I have my flail mower on the back. It's a 12-foot wide mower. And then the loader, which comes in handy for a lot of things. So this is the shaker. This is my brother-in-law's. He has a few of these. And so yeah, it has one wheel in the front that you steer with, and then in front of that wheel is a little brush that sweeps the nuts out of the way so they don't get crunched under the wheel. And then this is actually sitting here. It would be working right now, but unfortunately the drive hub broke on it right there. And we just found out that to replace this hub is $7,000. And they're searching all over the country to find one. So I think they found one, but it's $7,000, which is insane. And then to buy a new one of these shaker machines is like $200,000 now, which is unbelievable. But so the operator sits in there, and then it has this boom, and then off to the side is like the giant pincher claw, and it grabs the tree trunk and clamps onto it with these rubber pads, and then the whole thing vibrates like crazy. It really shakes. I'll try to include a little clip of it actually in operation, but right now it's broken down. But, you know, the wear and tear on these machines is just unbelievable because the vibration and the usage. They're only used for a couple of months out of the year, but man, do they go hard when they're working. So yeah, it has brushes in front of the wheels, both sides of the wheel. So if you need to back up or go forward, so those brushes come down and sweep the nuts out of the way. Yeah, and then the nuts rain down on top of the machine while it's working. So that's my orchard update for the end of August, and yeah, I'll let you know how the harvest goes, and you know how the yield ends up. But it's not looking very good. This side over here along the road is always lighter than the other end of the rows, which are closer to the creek. So yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers, you guys. Here come my kids on the golf cart.
Fresh. So good.